Garth Lenz is an internationally published environmental photojournalist. He is best known for his photographic work detailing environmental and social justice issues throughout Canada, Chile, Ecuador, Borneo, and China. This work has led to many assignments and publications in numerous books, newspapers, and magazines. He is the co-founder of the Markets Campaign to encourage corporate responsibility as a tool for forest protection and conservation. He has made presentations to the European Parliament in Brussels, and they've given a presentation on boreal forest issues and First Nation issues to the Senate subcommittee hearings on the boreal forest in Ottawa. He is only one of 60 photographers in the whole world who has been assigned to the who has been designated a Nature Conservancy photographer. Please give it up to Garth Lenz. The suspense is killing all of you, I know.
Sorry.
Is that coming through okay? Is that loud enough? Thank you, everyone. Oh, I don't think I'm going to check my email. Thank you, everyone, for coming here. Thank you, all the organizers, and especially a big thank you to Roberta for organizing all of this and being very flexible and shifting things around to help get $10 for So, the Alberta tar sands or oil sands is the world's largest energy project. And the reason this is so critical is these are the third largest fossil fuel reserves in the entire world. It is also the largest energy project the world has ever seen, the greatest concentration of capital the world has ever seen, and it is the single largest source of foreign oil. Now, you've heard them called tar sands, you've heard them called oil sands. What's actually trapped underneath the boreal forests and wetlands of northern Alberta is something called bitumen. Sticky, tar-like, coffee consistency material which requires enormous amounts of energy, water, and carbon to produce synthetic oil. It's leading to a level of devastation which we really haven't seen before. To try to give some sort of a sense of what that is, were I to stand beside this truck, the largest such truck of its kind in the world, my head would come up. That truck is 47.5 feet long, 32.5 feet wide by 25 feet. To give you an idea, you could build a two-story. I'm just going to move this thing down a little bit. You could build a two-story, 3,000 square foot home within the dimensions of that truck. So think of this truck not as a truck, but as a 3,000 square foot home. And begin lining them up, left to right, bottom to top. And imagine what size of a subdivision or residential area. Line those up and imagine what size of subdivision residential area that might be in Berkeley, and then extend that to the same mine, zoomed back a little bit. And here, this is a truck here, and up towards the top, those lights that are about the size of a Pixar truck. And now imagine just how vast an area that might comprise. This is one of 5 mines. There are already plans in process and land lease that would ensure the expansion of the existing tar sands mines tenfold. This is just one of 5 mines. Now, the other method by which this bitumen is extracted is something called in situ or SAGD, steam activated gravity drainage. This is much like hydrofracking. Huge, vast areas are filled with subterranean pipeline networks. Large amounts of chemically treated water are pumped deep under the Earth's surface, heated up, and this liquefies the tar-like bitumen so it can drain down to another pipe and then is pumped back up to the surface. And while it may not look as devastating as the mines, it is perhaps even more ecologically damaging. Because what happens here is a vast area is fragmented, a far larger area than even the mines, leading to a 90% reduction of key boreal indicator species like woodland caribou and grizzly bear. It also requires even more energy and produces at least as much carbon as the mines. The oil produced by either method is some of the highest carbon content oil produced in the world. And this is one of the reasons why the Alberta tar sands are the largest single point source of carbon in Canada and the fastest growing source of carbon. In fact, they produce as much carbon annually right now as some entire countries such as Denmark. The other major issue is water. It takes 3 to 5 barrels of water to produce 1 barrel of synthetic tar sands oil. And that oil is being withdrawn from the Athabasca River and then laced with some of the most toxic chemicals known to humanity and dumped back into the largest toxic impoundments in the entire world. To give you an idea of the scale, just one company, Syncrude, dumped into just one of its tailings ponds, and there are now 19 tailings ponds lining either side of the Athabasca River. But into just one of those tailings ponds is dumped 250,000 tons of this toxic sludge every single day. These tailings ponds are laced with NAPAs, PAHs, strychnine, mercury, lead, arsenic, all of the most toxic carcinogenic substances that we know. And those tailings ponds, as I said, are the largest toxic impoundments on the entire planet. They can be seen from space. Again, if you use those trucks that comprise the size of a 2-story, 3,000 square foot home, you can get a sense of the scale. Individual tailings ponds range in size up to 9,000 acres. That's 2/3 the size of the entire island of Manhattan. Now, the tailings ponds are created by the soil and the sand and the clay that is removed to create the mines, is then piled up to make these high dikes, some as high as 300 feet. And we call it tar sands or oil sands because it is a sand-like substance and it's porous. And what's happening, if you can imagine the enormous weight and pressure of these toxic lakes pushing out, what's happening is the tailings ponds are leaching into the Athabasca River, which you can see in the background, and down into downstream Aboriginal communities such as Fort Chippewa, where these are showing up in the food chain, these toxic compounds used in the tailings ponds. And those communities are experiencing much higher rates of cancer than the rest of the population of Canada. And perhaps most alarming, in the last 10 years, the appearance of rare autoimmune diseases and cancers that were not known before in these communities. In a relatively short period of time, Dr. John O'Connor, the resident doctor in Fort Chippewa, found 2 cases of bile duct cancer. Bile duct cancer is one of the most aggressive, unfortunately, rare forms of cancer. Now, it may not be too impressive that there's 2 cases in Fort Chippewa. But bile duct cancer occurs generally in the general population about 1 in 100,000. And there are 800 people in Fort Chippewa. I have been lent boats by Indigenous people on these river systems and told not to eat the fish, and then found on those same people's front porch fish to feed their families. And that is because these remote communities have very, very high level of unemployment, and the food is extraordinarily expensive. And so these people are forced this soul-killing decision. Are they going to feed their children? Or are they going to let them go hungry? Are they going to give them food that they know is going to increase, potentially substantially, their possibility of getting cancer later? And the fact that this is happening in Canada, a wealthy nation, a nation where people are getting rich from the toxins 70 miles upstream that are poisoning this community, this is an international scandal. Now, the tar sands are found within one of the greatest ecosystems we have in the world, the boreal forest ecosystem, the largest, most intact terrestrial forest ecosystem we have in the world, the greatest terrestrial carbon sink in the planet. In fact, the amount of carbon held within the boreal forests and wetlands of Canada is the equivalent to that globally produced from the burning of all fossil fuels over a 10-year period. It's also the most concentrated terrestrial carbon sink we have. Twice as much carbon is held in an acre of boreal forest than in the tropical rainforest. And in the creation of the tar mines, what's happening is we are removing systematically our most effective carbon sink, and we're replacing it with potentially our most carbon-intensive fossil fuel production, and we're extending that over the third largest oil reserves on the planet. This is one of the reasons why Canada, which used to be a climate change champion, has walked away from the Kyoto Accord. What's worse, we're trying to get other countries to walk away from these accords. We have full-time lobbyists in Washington discouraging you from bringing in legislation that would reduce carbon. We're pushing things like the Keystone Pipeline. Now, 70 miles downstream from the Alberta tar sands lies the greatest freshwater delta in the entire world, the East Athabasca Delta, the only delta at the confluence of all four migratory bird flyways in North America. This is an incredibly globally significant area. Now, the boreal forests, wetlands, and forests of northern Canada are the almost half of the 800 species that you find in North America of bird species migrate, nest, and raise their young. And many, many millions of these are coming through the Athabasca Delta and landing there. It's also the home to the greatest remaining wild herd of woodland caribou. And it too is being impacted by the tar sands, chiefly by the amount of water being pulled from the Athabasca River, which is causing these wetlands to dry out, and by the toxic burden of the tailings ponds. Now here we have the area where the world's greatest, most intact forest meets on the other side of those coast mountains in British Columbia, the greatest remaining rainforest in the world, the Great Bear Rainforest. And as you walk from this boreal forest down into the Great Bear Rainforest, you pass through dry, cold boreal forest where these trees might be 100 years old and 6 inches to a foot in diameter. And then you pass into the Great Bear Rainforest, an area of 10 to 20 feet of rain, trees up to 2,000 years old, 30 feet across, and perhaps 300 feet tall. The largest remaining temperate rainforest, and the home to some of the greatest concentrations of the most iconic species found in North America. And the foundation of that ecosystem is the salmon. Everything depends on the salmon. The bears, the coyotes, the wolves, even the forests. They've done core drilling and they found salmon isotopes in the forest, and sometimes this is referred to as a salmon forest. Now, Enbridge has decided that they want to build a pipeline 600 miles out to the coast, from Fort McMurray out to the port of Kitimat. It's the same company which averages a pipeline spill every week and was responsible for the Kalamazoo River disaster. Now we're supposed to trust them to build a pipeline to some of the most remote areas in North America, over hundreds of the richest salmon streams in North America as well. And again, when we have a pipeline spill, all of the species that depend on those salmon will be severely impacted. And that includes both the Aboriginal and the non-Aboriginal populations, which depend on this as an important cultural link, but also as an economic link and part of a food fishery. Now, once that diluted bitumen tar sands crude gets to the port of Kitimat, it will go through one of the most difficult to navigate passages in the entire world, Douglas Channel. And those tankers, up to the size of the Empire State Building, some 10 times the size of the Exxon Valdez, will go right over the BC ferry Queen of the North that ran aground and sunk a number of years ago. What chance do these 300 massive tankers per year have of not one of these sinking very, very quickly? And to do that, that will end the incredible diversity and beauty of this ecosystem. Now, the First Nations communities understand this. They are a seafaring people. They have fished Many of them are involved in tourism here on the coast, and the coastal First Nations are unanimously opposed to this because they understand the deadly impact that one of these tanker spills will have on their entire future and their future for generation upon generation. Also understand that when an oil tanker spills, and the oil industry talks about a successful cleanup is defined as one in which 10 to 15% of the oil is recovered. That means you can rest assured that 85 to 90% of that oil is still in the oceanic ecosystem. Now, you also have now the proposal of the Keystone Pipeline. A pipeline not to America, a pipeline through America. Because the whole purpose of this pipeline is to expand the production of the tar sands, currently capped at about 1.7 million barrels per day. The Keystone Pipeline means they can produce another 830,000 barrels of tar sand oil every single day. And why do they want to take it to the Gulf Coast? Well, yes, that's where the large refineries are that can handle this heavy crude, but it's also handy for export. And the whole purpose of the tar sands, the Keystone Pipeline, is not energy security for America. It is maximum profit for the oil producers, who will receive anywhere from $20 to $40 per barrel more for this oil if they can get it to Europe or Asia. That is why we are proposing a leaky tar sands pipeline through your agricultural heartland. Would you like to know how many permanent jobs the State Department has calculated this will result in? After construction, you will have 2,000 to 4,000 jobs for maybe 2 or 3 years, temporary construction jobs. A few months ago, the Obama administration produced over 250,000 jobs in 1 month alone. So it gives you an idea of just what a significant impact this will have on your economy. Not much. Total number of permanent jobs, 32. I don't think it's worth selling out the future of your country for 32 jobs. What's really frightening is the proposal that will see production go from about 1.7 million barrels per day to something in the neighborhood of 5 or 6 million barrels per day over the next 20 years. This network will allow the massive expansion of the Alberta tar sands. It is now in its infancy. Even at $200 billion investment, that's still at its infancy. This proposal will industrialize an area of land in northern Alberta greater than the state of Florida. Now, I don't mean to imply that it will be strictly one massive mine. It will be a combination of mines, tailings ponds, refineries, upgraders, and in situ development. In the result, a very, very large portion of our most effective terrestrial carbon sink is going to be removed and replaced by perhaps the world's most carbon-intensive fossil fuel production, extended over the third largest oil reserves on the planet. This is why James Hansen has said that the tapping of the tar sands means game over for stabilizing the climate, because he's done the math. So what do we know? We know that we don't need any more tar mines. We cannot afford to expand our pipeline network and further tie us to a fossil fuel future. We cannot, in good conscience, allow the most toxic and largest toxic contaminants in the world to grow and multiply and further threaten some of the most vulnerable communities that we have in North America. We need to understand that clean water will always be worth more than dirty oil. We need to realize that the forests and wetlands, not just the boreal forests and wetlands, but the temperate forests, the tropical forests, that these are the lungs of the earth. This is the global support system on which we all depend. Now, I'm the father of 2 beautiful children. I'm also a sap. And I think that as a parent, we spend an awful lot of time thinking of our primary job is to keep our children safe. We worry a lot about the boogeyman in the bushes, and I do too. But the real threat to our children's safety is what we are doing to this planet every single day. As a parent, if you are to bring, thank you. As a parent, if you're going to bring life into this planet, you have a responsibility to ensure that that planet will support them in the same kind of opportunities that we have benefited from. And we need to work tirelessly to ensure that their future doesn't look like this, but looks like this. Thank you all very, very much.